I will just take a moment to say before I introduce our speakers that uh, be kind to yourselves as we talk about carbon pricing and this moment in October 2025. Well, as you probably ascertained, I'm a classical musician by training, although that's not what I do all the time anymore. And one reason that I decided not to pursue that professionally was because in playing music, you have to constantly achieve the perfect balance between ego and humility. You have to be humble enough to accept constant feedback, usually of the constructive variety, while also truly believing that you are the person who should be up on that stage performing. Everyone should be listening to you. And that's a really hard balance to strike. And I say that because personally, that's kind of where I am with carbon pricing right now. I started with CCL 10 years ago. I was there in 2015 holding up a cartoon showing my MP what carbon pricing is. I was there in 2018 standing outside Center Block on Parliament Hill getting rained on as a fire alarm went off. And then when it finally stopped going off, I went back inside to continue the meeting I was in with an MP who, for some reason, believed that I had been paid by several well-to-do hippies to come talk to him. I continued listening to what he had to say with kindness and compassion and patience. And because I believed that what I was doing, lobbying for carbon pricing, was the right thing to be doing. And so I think that we should all remember that lobbying for carbon pricing, as we have done, as we continue to do, is the right thing to do. And we also need to have the humility to learn those lessons and accept those lessons with gratitude. So, to that end, we're going to hear from our illustrious speakers. So to start us off, I will turn to the correct page. To start us off, we have Dave Sawyer, who is a leading environmental economist with a 27-year track record in solving policy challenges for sustainable development in Canada and around the world. And Dave is going to talk a bit about the industrial price on pollution, why it matters, the key policy details that need improvement and protection. So with that, welcome, Dave.
Thank you. I'm a policy cartoonist. I get my pencil out and I do the figuring, and then I get my crayons out and I draw, and I communicate. And so, yeah, that's really how you sort of define the policy space. You do the deep thinking, and then you have to think about your communications lines and how you're going to get your message out. Carbon pricing is not dead. It's really not. I mean, it covers, right now, it covers 42% of our national emissions, a little more than that when you throw in the Quebec, when you throw in the non-industrial Quebec covered emissions. That's a big chunk of our national emissions. Globally, if you ever see the International Emissions Trading Association, they're sort of taking stock of global action, shows just a rise in global carbon pricing systems and the emergence of those. So they're alive in Canada. They're certainly growing, and yeah, we lost one, but we didn't fully lose it. When you think about policy and what policy does, so the Clean Fuel Regulation that you might have saw, the job-killing carbon tax 2.0 that Poilievre was pushing around, the official opposition leader, that sends a price signal into the fuel market. So it decarbonizes upstream. You can argue about that, whether or not ethanol is reducing emissions. I think it is. The quantification methods say it is. And downstream, it's sending a price signal into the fuel system that's raising prices, right? And that drives a conservation effect. And so carbon pricing was always a complementary tool to a whole toolbox of regulations, subsidy programs, and a real sort of policy package. And when you think about carbon pricing, except for the large industrial emitters, certainly at the household level, it's really just a sort of a nudge to get you going, because we have EV programs under threat. We have all kinds of subsidy programs. We have fuel efficiency standards for vehicles. The list goes on. And governments, federal, provincial, and territorial governments, have rolled out about 400 policies since 2016. And so carbon pricing and industrial carbon pricing are just two of those. And so that's sort of the way I think about it. And then I'm an eternal optimist, because I've been doing carbon pricing for a while and I have to be. My clicker, can I click please? And this is something I put together well over a decade ago, the little icon, that's Canadian climate policy in a storm, perpetual storm. It's really nothing has changed. Okay, so I want to bust some myths. Policies are not working, emissions are rising. Your policy's crap. Carbon price didn't work. BC's emissions are larger than they were when they started. Alberta's emissions are higher. They've had industrial carbon price since 2017. And in fact, you look at a small decline. Now it's 8%. We just updated the Canadian Climate Institute. You might have noticed we got an early estimate of national emissions. We're down 8%. Emissions are flat. Policy's not working. Over here, we have emissions. We have the emission intensity in the economy, which is a really good indicator that says emissions per unit of energy or economic activity is falling rapidly, which means for every unit of growth and activity, kilometers driven, barrels produced, we're actually decarbonizing the emissions per unit quite fast. And that's a combination of policy and market drivers. So market drivers, LED light bulbs just flow into the country. EVs, global spillover flow into the country. They're manufactured here, but we get them from the US, we get them from overseas. So they just show up at our shore, and that helps sort of nudge along the process. So, okay, emissions aren't working. We can go in, and if you look, there's something called the Kaya identity. Anybody know Kaya, K-A-Y-A? Go look it up. So it's a way to decompose emissions, to think about emissions in your head. So this graph is basically saying there's three drivers. Orange is economic activity. That is upward pressure on emissions from more cars, more activity, more GDP, more barrels, more people. So as the economy grows, the emission grows. And then what's offsetting it, and there's two things we have to do here to reduce emissions. Energy efficiency is the orange bar, and on the left is historical, and the right is projected modeling, which is wrong but notional. And you can learn from it. So the energy efficiency in the economy has been a huge driver. So we talk about carbon pricing, and carbon pricing is important, and it does nudge energy efficiency along. But really, the other policies and those global spillovers in technology are balancing out the emission growth with offsetting emissions per unit of energy or activity, depending on what the indicator you're looking at. So we have this rise in emissions from activity. We've got a couple offsets, one being energy efficiency, and then the green bars are decarbonization. So that's fuel switching, natural gas or coal to natural gas, so that reduces emissions, coal to renewables, that reduces emissions. And so we can basically, with this Kaya identity, look at the historical data and say, you know what, emissions would have been higher, 221 megatons, if efficiency and decarbonization weren't biting and working. And then we can say in the future, what do we have to do and where do we have to go to reduce emissions? So that's a mental model on how policy works, and I sort of like to think about that. Okay, so this is some modeling out into the future. No carbon policy is the red line, so we spin our models out in the future. We have all kinds of policies in there, all kinds of technology, growth in the economy, growth in oil sands, you name it, it's in there. And if we didn't have policy, that's where we'd be. Policy's working. So we can look at the historical data, which is here. Historical data says, hey, policy's working. Markets are working to drive down emissions. And here we can forecast in the future and say, without policy, emissions would be a lot higher. So we strip them out of the model. And then we add in policy. So these are the emission reduction plans, the federal government's ERP from last year being updated. We have some categories, legislated or policies you can kick. So the proposed oil and gas cap is not a legislated policy, that's an announced. And then the carbon price that was just repealed, the carbon charge would be in legislated. And then we sort of say, okay, are we on path to the target? And then we have a net zero path that we model out. And right now, where we've repealed stuff last year, we looked around and now the announced, I won't go into the less stringent and more stringent, but well, I will a bit, but basically, are the industrial carbon pricing systems working as expected? And we would say, no, they're not. The less stringent is where we are. They're not sending the signal that everybody anticipates they are. Oh, $170 carbon price coming, $95 today. The price in Alberta today for a carbon unit is zero because of reforms Alberta just did. They're selling at $20, nobody's buying, the market's illiquid. So the models say, oh yeah, $95, you get this. But when you look at the real world policy as implemented, you get in a very different place. And so that's what we look at. So right now we're off path, and it's a little worse right now. And you can go to our website and look at early estimate of national emissions. There's about an 800-word blog there walking through why we think we're significantly off path to the 2030 target. Don't be too depressed. We're way better than we were a decade ago. That's the way I look at it. Every ton matters as opposed to hitting targets. Okay, industrial carbon pricing. So big policies matter. That's not a very good thing. Okay, so what we did here is we took our model and we added in our various policies that we like or don't like, that are big or small. So at the far end, it's not that easy to see. This is the large emitter trading systems here. This is the proposed oil and gas emissions cap, methane regulations. Here's the fuel charge that was repealed. Waste methane, landfill, really important, clean fuel regs, etc. down the road, these ZEV standards. So everything's contributing, but what are the big ones? And this is just a range. It matters in the model how you put a policy on or off. There's overlap, so we do it 2 ways to catch the range. Alone, you get more. Together, there's overlaps in policy, so you get less. Overlaps, policy, less. So big, important policy, industrial carbon pricing. That's basically where you end up, and we've been doing a lot of analytics around pushing this forward to ensure that we keep that policy because it's the most important policy we have in the country. Lots of important complementary policies, but the large industrial emitters don't have the policies like we have. Vehicle fuel standards, clean fuel regulation, EV subsidies, all kinds of, well, they come and go, but all kinds of household programs. The industrials don't have those. Basically, there's a few policies, but basically don't have them. So this policy is the backstop policy to drive emission reductions. There's my time, 8 minutes. So I will wrap up here with, okay, so what's going on with the large industrial emitter systems? They were designed out of Alberta in Canada, setting aside the Western Climate Initiative in Quebec, which is a robust, well-designed system that has all kinds of great design features to deal with instability. So prices are up and down. It's got a price collar. So basically, if there's too many units, free allocations, permits in the system, so that, cap and trade systems, you cap emissions, you create scarcity. Hey, we can buy and sell and we can trade. So what happens if you have too many of those units? Governments basically give out for competitiveness reasons too many units, or they get it wrong. Too much supply in the market, price crashes. We have a price floor, $30, $40, climbing in time. So that sets expectations to drive investment choice. So that's a big deal. The Alberta system that the rest of the country is modeled on for the output-based pricing systems, the industrial carbon pricing, doesn't have that design element. And they weren't really designed to be markets. They were designed to control costs at the high end and allow some sort of handshake deals, buying and selling credits. And so what's happened in short order is basically the systems are broken, governments are watering them down, you don't have the sort of insurance in the system to keep prices up at that floor, to allow for transparent trade. We don't know what the prices are because there's not a market. It's handshake deals, it's all very opaque. So what's the wrap up there? So there's a lot going on there. And I've been working on this stuff for a long time, and I still am surprised about what I learned about these systems. But anyway, what's the state of play? Prime Minister Carney, in his election, his leadership election platform, and in his federal election platform, so Liberal leadership and federal platform, committed to modernizing industrial carbon pricing systems. So it's good because Alberta just watered their system down. Alberta was like, oh, we're just going to do this technical stuff. No big deal. We're going to give credits for investment. The market's now liquid. So, and there's no opacity, there's no transparency. There is opacity, there's no transparency to see what's going on. So watch the federal government the next month or so, what they're going to do in the next year about strengthening these systems and setting a minimum national floor and imposing it. And that means all the provinces have to hit that minimum national floor. And that's how we do climate policy in the country, shared jurisdiction, FedProv, this sort of thing. So I'm going to stop there. A lot going on, and I could confuse myself talking about it all day long, which I do, and I'll stop.
Can you hear me? Oh, yes. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Helen Hsu. Helen is an addiction and mental health physician in Ottawa. and will be speaking on behalf of CAPE. And just a couple things that I should have mentioned earlier. So to our speakers, just make sure that you are speaking into a mic because we have some people joining on Zoom who can't hear if you're not speaking into a microphone. And also for everyone in the room, the same way we did with the previous session, if you have any questions, you can write them on a piece of paper, and after our three speakers speak, we will take questions from the audience to all three of them. And so with that, let's continue on. Welcome, Dr. Helen Hsu.
All for me. Can people hear me? Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm Dr. Helen and I'm a physician here in Ottawa. I'm here speaking to you on behalf of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. Very excited to be here today and hoping to offer a different perspective. And I think everybody here is very engaged and very sold on the idea already that climate change is important and we should do something about it. And I'm hoping that what I can offer is some things for you to think about when you're talking to friends, family, colleagues about the importance of climate change action and maybe bring more people on board. That's what I'm hoping I can do for you here today by talking to you about the health impact of climate change and leading to why it's so important to take action. So, what would pollution pricing do? These guys are going to tell you all about it. I'm sold. I think it's really important. I think it clearly works. I think it clearly is important. But we need people to come on board, right? This issue got politicized and killed. So we need citizens to understand that this is important. And so when we talk about climate change, right? So we know that climate change is harmful to our health. And the first thing that we can think about is air pollution, right? This is the most obvious thing that jumps out. How will carbon pricing help air pollution? Well, it will reduce emissions, right? And when we reduce emission from burning fossil fuels, we get cleaner air. Fantastic, right? Because what do we get when we don't have clean air is we get cardiovascular disease, right? There's actually a very clear link between cardiovascular disease and respiratory diseases with air pollution. And so there's various figures that are out there estimating the health impact and the mortality impact. And so the WHO actually estimates that about 1 in 7 premature death in Canada can be attributed to the impact of air pollution. So breathing bad air, really difficult for our heart and our lungs to manage. And that comes with a price tag because we have a public healthcare system, thank goodness, and also just for now, but I hope we keep it. And so we have to share this cost, right? This is not something that will go away because we don't want to look at that part of the accounting. And so air pollution is very difficult and very dangerous. And I like to also give some personal anecdotes of patients that I've seen. And so when I think about air pollution, I think of a mom in my practice who's in her 30s. She has asthma. Her young daughter, who is 5, has asthma and likes outdoor soccer. Lots of little girls do. But when there's wildfires in the summer, how does she choose between going to play soccer with her friends or staying inside because the air is cleaner? Right? What if she goes to play soccer and she has an asthma attack and that's a pachio? And these are the decisions that parents are starting to have to make when they think about their children. And also all of us have to make, right? With those wildfire, difficult air pollution days. How do we prioritize our health knowing that the weather is changing? Another big aspect is climate change on vector-borne diseases. So this is a big thing. Lyme disease is something that a lot of people have heard of, but there's a lot of other diseases than Lyme that's becoming more and more common. When I did medical school more than 10 years ago, we didn't have Lyme disease actually in the area, and now we do. Right? That's a change that I saw in my relatively young career that is completely new, and Canadians are going to need to recognize that we're going to deal with more and more transmissible diseases that are carried by vectors that we are not used to, and that can lead to paralysis, long-term cardiac effects. And this is, again, something I've seen in patients. I had a young patient who was also in his 30s, healthy, went for a hike in the Frontenac area, and came back with a tick-borne disease that paralyzed him for months. And so that's a man who's not working, right? Not that we want to measure humans by productivity, but unfortunately, this is the economics way of looking at it. So there's a young person in his prime, now no longer working, having to stay in a hospital for a month getting rehabilitation because he can't walk anymore, right? And all he did was go for a hike. And this is something we're going to see more and more, right? We have West Nile, we have Lyme disease, we have Parasin, all fancy names to say these are things we didn't used to have, and we're going to have them. Yeah. And then now there's the mental health aspect of climate change. So here in Ottawa, we had the tornado that came through a few years ago, damaged a lot of property. We get more and more tornadoes every summer. I don't know if people have noticed, but we somehow ended up in Tornado Alley now here in Ottawa, right? And that damages property, and insurance is going to go up. The financial squeeze on people is going to go up because their home insurance is going to increase, those lucky enough to have homes. And when your home is damaged and you have to be displaced, that leads to mental health problems. I have a patient with post-traumatic stress disorder in my practice who suffered for years after the tornado because he is so traumatized from his home being completely damaged and having to be relocated with his wife and daughter, not knowing when they can go back. That's very traumatizing to people. And again, we're going to have more and more of this. And these are the health impacts of climate change that touches people's lives that I think we need to always remember. And when we think about things like carbon pricing, it sounds so vague. It sounds like numbers, but it's not just about the numbers. It's about people, right? And it's about Canadian lives. And we have to also think about the equity angle of the climate change affecting vulnerable populations the most. So if we say, heat waves, just get an AC, right? Hide inside in your air-conditioned home. Not everybody has access to air conditioning, for example, right? And that's something that's going to affect everybody. But of course, those who are most vulnerable are going to be most impacted because they can least afford the adaptation measures, right? And so there's this health inequity issue, and also the issue between the Canadian South and the Canadian North. The Arctic is warming several times faster than down here, and they are already in a region that is relatively economically deprived, and this is going to impact them even more. And so from that equity perspective, right, the carbon pricing system can help reduce some of that inequity, right, by redistributing the money from people who have lots of resources, doing lots of fun things, burning a lot of fossil fuels, and then redistributing that credit into the checking account of patients, my patients who are low income. A lot of them actually did benefit from the carbon pricing system, or the carbon tax, dare I say it. It really was a relief for low-income Canadians, and then it was gone, which is really shit and really terrible. And so we have to come back. I think my time is almost up, but to just summarize, right? Air pollution, big bracket of disease, of health impacts, infections that are coming. It's coming. It's here. Big bracket. And then also mental health and social instability that's going to come as we have more food scarcity, right? From droughts and floods. All the farmers that you may know are going to tell you we had a terrible drought summer. So our food ecosystem is changing as well. And that's going to affect food security. And there's going to be climate migration, right? And immigration is a very big, controversial, also politically hot topic right now that I am not a politician. I'm not getting into it. But immigration is going to come, right? Because people are going to want to leave areas of the world that are much worse affected than we are. And they're going to come. And so that's going to change our society, whether we want to or not, whether we we like it or not. And that's something we have to think about. And these are all downstream effects, right? That affects physical and mental health. And so I hope this helped you conceptualize, right, the human cost of climate change and the money that goes into treating all of these things for promoting people's health. It has to come from somewhere. Carbon tax is great. I can't call it carbon tax anymore. The pollution pricing system, though, is a great way to get additional revenue from the society to fund the other side of this equation. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Hsu for sharing that perspective. That gives us so much to think about. And our third and final panelist is Dr. Paul Kershaw, who is a tenured professor at the University of British Columbia and the founder of Generation Squeeze, a movement championing fairness for every generation. And Dr. Kershaw will talk a little bit about the already ongoing competition between framing the industrial price on carbon as something good and something bad. And we'll also talk a bit about lessons learned from the consumer price on carbon. Welcome, Dr. Kershaw.
Thank you very much. And thanks. It's a pleasure to be on the panel with my other really wise speakers and to see such a full room of people who've come from a variety of places, giving up your personal time on a weekend to be active citizens to make our cities, provinces, country, and planet better off than we found it. I want to start where Mary did earlier today by acknowledging that we know the carbon price debate has shifted. And I thought you did a lovely job at making us feel okay about that because there's a lot that remains at stake. We may not have the consumer price right now, but the principle that the polluter ought to pay for his or her pollution is something that remains really critical to defend at this moment, which means we need to be turning our attention really to the industrial price on carbon, because that's where the next fight has already begun. And Dave has shown you that it is the primary policy driving down emissions in our country. It is this most significant policy issue at play. That then brings us to the toolkit that Generation Squeeze has created to help all of us defend the industrial pollution price at this moment. It helps us defend why big companies have to pay for their messes without getting lost in a math lesson. Because as good as Dave Sawyer is at communicating the math lesson, it creates many, many comms opportunities for opponents to distract us in fake information that makes us angry and causes us to lose a lot of the debate. And so our toolkit is designed to help us avoid that pitfall so that we go back to first principles, that no one should be able to pollute for free, especially when the costs fall primarily on our kids and grandchildren. Our toolkit is designed to learn from what didn't work when defending the price on pollution. I think many of you will know that those who proposed to axe the carbon tax, they didn't fight really with facts and figures. They fought with fear and emotion, especially about how policy changes were impacting our wallets. And so that fear and frustration then effectively led people to say, I may not be able to afford this, which then prompted many, many environmental communicators to say, we need to fight the debate in terms of showing, no, the green shift is going to make life more affordable. And it often does. And the Canadian Climate Institute regularly can show us ways in which that is absolutely true. But it doesn't matter because we're not really fighting about the truth. Because as mentioned, it was much easier for opposition to spread fake news and spread misinformation about affordability and inflation faster than any nuanced evidence about the way that our consumer carbon plan worked. And so the moment that you had to have the Prime Minister or anyone else start that math lesson and say, look, you got to trust us. You get more back in the rebate than you're spending at the pump or on your heating bill. That's not a 5-second clip that does well on social media or on the nightly news. And it got trashed time and time again with a simple message that the carbon price was driving unaffordability. So our Good Ancestor toolkit trying to defend the industrial price right now tries to learn from that lesson. Yes, the evidence absolutely matters. We need to enshrine the truth, however, in a narrative that fights values and emotions used by the Axe the Tax campaign with values and emotions, but in service of the truth. And so here I want to really draw our attention to a key difference. Whereas the Axe the Tax campaign wants to engage Canadians and consumers, we are recommending with our toolkit, go deeper. Engage citizens as parents who want to protect their kids. Engage citizens as people who want to leave a proud legacy. Because I guarantee you, no parent will ever put on her tombstone that I'm proud I didn't pay for my pollution. I'm pretty darn confident almost every one of us would have liked to put on our tombstone, I tried to leave a legacy my child could be proud of. That's the deeper sense of emotion, deeper moral justification that can help enmesh all of the wonderful details that Dave Sawyer and the Canadian Climate Institute can share with us, but in this principles-based narrative that can disrupt the ease with which people make us angry about a carbon price potentially driving unaffordability. This approach isn't just made up out of thin air. It draws on three powerful observations from marketing and moral psychology. Let me water ski over them very quickly. First, has anyone here read the book Winning the Story Wars? It's a little over a decade old by Jonas Sachs. Strongly recommend it, especially the second half. It's about empowerment marketing. And Jonas Sachs reminds us that sure, many of us on a daily basis are motivated by self-interest and affordability pressures. But it is absolutely clear that all of us live lives that are searching for something deeper, a purpose, a sense of legacy, a sense of justice in many instances. We want to be part of something bigger than all of us. That is why you are here today. And so that helps us remember that as we feature the kind of evidence that Dave Sawyer was sharing at the top of the panel, we don't have to worry early on in our debate with those who are proposing to get rid of the industrial price, that we somehow have to make clear to them that, look, the industrial price is something that big companies pay for the messes that they're making. And no, it doesn't necessarily then get picked up in the cost that we're paying at the grocery store at the pump. Dave Sawyer's research can absolutely show how it's very difficult for big emitters to pass on those prices. But that's not where we want to get lost in the debate. We want to start the debate by saying a very principled statement. Companies should pay for their pollution because that's how we protect what we hold to be sacred, our kids' future, their water, their air, their food supply. Make it as simple as that. Then, as we need to, pivot to the evidence. But we're getting fought on a very simple message. It's hurting our wallets. Like, no. Pivot from that and say, what's at issue is our kids. And that has so much potential to move many, many people. You don't have to take my word for it. Take amazing research from Potential Energy, which a year ago published data from interviews with 60,000 people in 18 different countries. And they found that the theme of love for our kids and the next generation is a far more potent motivator for climate action than narratives about jobs, prosperity, or reducing extreme weather. So in the light of that observation, we then enmesh that focus on our kids and leaving a proud legacy in one other body of literature, this time from a fellow named Jonathan Haidt, who talks about the righteous mind, why good people disagree about religion and politics. And Jonathan Haidt's work makes very clear that whether you're on the left, or the right, or the center, and really across many a cultural context around the planet, we all share what he describes as moral taste buds, sensitivities to different moral issues. What differs between our space on an ideological perspective is how we emphasize them. But we all share them. And so we can sensitize those moral taste buds effectively. We can start to build bridges. Here are some of the key moral taste buds that Jonathan Haidt routinely features. And at the top of our list, I want to feature the idea of we need to be loyal to those that we care about and not betray them. And so you'll see in our toolkit messages about when we let industries dump pollution for free, literally we're betraying our children, forcing them to pay for other people's messes. We'll pick up on themes of fairness and free riding. When big polluters don't, when they free ride, they don't carry their load, and don't pay for their pollution, the rest of us, and especially our kids, end up cleaning up after them. The theme of what is sacred, and do we degrade what is sacred? I've already emphasized the idea that clean air and water are sacred, and letting pollution spreads degrades these things that we hold dear and threatens our children's health. There's an authority theme. We all like respect your elders. Well, our elders have this power of having come first. And with it, there's a duty then to steward the shared home that we want to remain worthy for our grandchildren. And last but not least, I'm sure this is one that will, is pretty common in many of your conversations already, this theme of care and not harming those that we love for. Every parent, every grandparent wants to protect their children from harm, including the dangers of a destabilized planet. So those are some of the key messages that you will see. But at the top of the list, on your social channels, or when the next time you see Premier Mo or our opposition leader, Mr. Poilievre, talking about axing the industrial price on pollution, if you happen to be at one of his events, hold a sign up and say, Mr. Poilievre, why do you propose to betray our children? I want him to answer that question. He's getting let off the hook time and time again. We need to know, why is he willing to betray our children? Why is Scott Moe willing to betray our children by not collecting the price on pollution in his province? And if we can get that theme asked over and over again in our social channels, wherever you meet in your spaces and places, this is a source of power to counter the challenge the industrial price. Our toolkit is ready for you to take action. I'll let you can use the QR code and whatnot. And I've been having a link to it on all of my slides so far. It's got ready to use messages to start conversations with friends, colleagues, decision makers. It has responses to naysayers. It has infographics and shareables that you can use across your channels and in real life. There's guidance about how to write an op-ed or a letter to the editor. And yes, there are links to massive amounts of evidence, often from the Canadian Climate Institute, all of which we can then frame around this narrative that says we want to leave the planet fit for our kids. So our guiding logic is simple. If we remind Canadians that politicians betray our children when they let industries pollute for free, forcing the next generation to deal with a mess that is not of their making, then we can build the public support needed for governments to protect and strengthen the industrial price on pollution, because more people will see there are better ways to ease affordability pressures without betraying our kids, and that making industries pay for their pollution is essential to leaving the planet fit for our grandchildren. I'll leave it up while you take the photo. There we go. This is a call to courage, my friends, and you already have that courage. That is why you're here in this room today. That is why you are gearing up to take lobby meetings, which is a level of engagement that few citizens ever do take. That is a high bar for participation in democracy, and kudos to you. Remember, as you do, that the industrial price on pollution is not simply about a fight over economics. It is a fight over character. Are we going to betray our children, letting short-term politics get in the way of actually protecting them and acting with loyalty and fairness, making sure industries clean up their messes so our kids don't have to? This toolkit should give you the language, the confidence, and also the community in which to stand up for that principle, because when we make a mess, we should clean it up. Every parent in this room teaches their kids that lesson, and it's now one we should expect every company to live up to as well. Thank you very much.
Well, if that didn't make you feel inspired, I don't know what to tell you. So we will now continue with questions for our panelists. I've received a few. I will accept any other questions you have. Also, those joining us on Zoom, you can ask questions as well, and I think they will make it to me one way or another. But just one administrative question for our panelists. Is it all right if we share your slides with today's participants?
100% yes for
Okay,
me.
fantastic. All right, so let's get things started. Okay, okay, yes, Dave Pyle, okay. So a question for Dave. Could you please comment on the interplay between large emissions trading systems and the proposed emissions cap?
On check. So you have two policies squeezing the same margins, so the same carbon margins, the same emitter sources. So the company thinks about, okay, I got to comply here, I have to comply there. I have to do A, I have to do B. Which one is costing me more money? Oh, this one's costing me more money. What do I have to do to comply there? Oh, maybe some less. So that's how the interactions work, and you basically end up scavenging. So the sum of the parts are not equal to one; they're basically less. So you get less, and you can deal with it through policy design. But the fundamental issue you have is that you're getting less with two policies. But then you could argue, and last point, policy durability. So a lot of its success in the country is driven by federal standards, floors, that then force provinces through equivalency agreements to do something. Provinces have their own policies, and then you have two policies there. And with the carbon tax, we saw one, disappearing. When you have two policies, if one disappears, you have another backstop. So sometimes those inefficiencies are okay because you've got a bunch of policies at play, and you got backstops. And that's typically how we've implemented policy in the country.
All right. To switch things up, our next question will be for Dr. Hsu. So this question is, what might be the long-term impact of eco-anxiety on our health system and economy? Thank you.
That's a good question. And it's interesting that you asked that because just between my colleagues in psychiatry and we've noticed there's an increase in anxiety in the young people. And of course, there's how they grew up with social media, internet, uncertain future, etc. But I do think actually a big part of it is eco-anxiety as well. And the fact that they don't know that they're going to grow up in the same world that we grew up in. And in fact, we all know they probably won't, right? They won't have the same biodiversity. They won't have access to the same opportunities that we had. And that I say that beyond the economic sense. And so how will it impact, I think it impacts their hope for the future and their hope for their lives. And that's really profound. That's more profound than how much it will cost our system. Right, it impacts what will their lives look like and how will they cope, right, in a world that's going to look different. It has less birds, less animals, less trees, more polluted water. No matter what you do, you can't get away from the pollution, the microplastics, the forever chemicals, and how that leads to actually cancers in younger people. Possibly it leads to dementia. There's some links there, right, of microplastics. And so how do they navigate this world? And I think that's a very fundamental question that they have to ask themselves now. And it's hard to put a price on that. How will it cost our system? I think it will cost our system because that anxiety has to be treated. But at the same time, I hesitate to always talk about it as if, oh, this individual has anxiety that needs to be treated, when this individual's anxiety is a consequence of a collective problem that we share globally. And so the solution of how to help their anxiety is to show them that we are trying as a collective to improve, right? But until we do, yeah, the anxiety is going to get worse. And yes, it will cost lots and lots of money to fix, quote unquote, fix or treat it, because the treatment is not individual.
And I'll just add, there's peer-reviewed literature out there that shows 3/4 of children age 6, or young people age 16 to 25 already feel a great deal of anxiety about climate change that's affecting their mental health now. This is a now thing. This is absolutely impacting the medical system now.
Yeah, this generation of kids are actually thinking about climate change way more than the generations before them.
Yeah, think about how, for me, summer used to be my favorite season as a child growing up. Now, with the young people around me, summer's the season of smoke, and they don't look forward to it in the same way. That's a fundamental shift. Anyhow, that wasn't my question, sorry.
No, please, thank you.
No, but that perspective is really important as well. So we have another question for Dave. This is about the interplay between industrial carbon pricing and the cap on emissions. So do we need a cap on emissions from the oil and gas sector if the industrial carbon price is stringent enough?
Somebody's doing their homework. Short answer, yes. If the industrial carbon pricing system truly gets strengthened to the levels that it was designed to deliver on, probably don't need the cap. But because the industrial carbon pricing systems have been watered down by the provinces and federal floor not being enforced, you need to do something with the oil sands emissions in particular have grown 150% since 2005 in terms of levels. They were up 3 megatons last year, driving all of our increase in emissions and record production to come. So you have to do something with them, and you don't need both policies. The feds thought they could put a regulation in that they could control, and they wouldn't have to push around the provinces as much through industrial carbon pricing, because the provinces basically meet a standard and defer. The feds defer their policy to the provinces. Okay, it looks equivalent to start, and then the provinces play around with it. Scott Moe, for example, canceling it. Alberta watering it down, and Ontario as well has a recycling system that's killed the market. So low incentive. So yeah, if the Carney government can push forward with, the Prime Minister can push forward with modernizing it, it might solve the problem, maybe.
So, I see a lot of us want to get in the weeds. There are several highly technical questions for Dave, so we'll see. We'll work through those.
We'll talk after.
So next we have a question for Paul. This is a big question. So this is about striking the balance between talking about facts and appealing to emotions, because it is true that sometimes people want one or the other. So the question is, should we use this message mostly only for educating the general population, or is it also recommended to use in lobby meetings? Or would politicians maybe feel like we're trying to appeal to their emotions and would maybe prefer to hear facts? So could you speak a bit about trying to strike that balance?
Well, I do encourage the Jonathan Haidt book, which reminds us all that human beings have kind of two kinds of cognition. We have an intuitive, often emotionally driven cognition that's immediate, fast. We're often not always even aware of it. And then we have rational cognition, where we use our language and our big front parts of our brains to rationalize what our initial intuition was. And that's really that's really how the human brain functions. I mean, human beings evolved over literally millions and millions of years from other animals that were having these intuitive reactions to a whole range of things that served them well. About 1 million years ago or so, we developed language, but when we developed language, the rest of our functioning didn't say, hey, we're just going to give the reins over to this new little tool. No, we developed that language because it served our ability. It gave us a new ability, and that was to better rationalize what we already wanted to do. Why do I tell you about how the human brain works? Because all humans, whether they're decision makers, they're our neighbors, our opponents, are going to have this combination of an intuitive reaction and the ability to reason about it. And so what we want is their initial reaction to our statements to cause them to lean in, to be interested, engage, not lean away, because if they lean away, the moment they lean away, it's hard to bring them back. You're going to spend the rest of your time bringing them back. This is, I think, critical if you're taking a lobby meeting on Monday with a decision maker. Think about what is your opening framing? What are your first few lines? And then sure, pivot to evidence, but then come back to the framing. Pivot to evidence, but it's a dance. And I'm a university professor who wishes it were the other way. I wish as a policy expert, I could just give you the policy evidence and the evidence would win the day. But the evidence is competing with so many other things in the policy arena. A range of power dynamics, a range of competing priorities, and we need a range of communication frames. And the opposition is really good at framing the issues in ways that didn't ever count on the evidence, because the evidence really wasn't in their favor. So don't get seduced into thinking you need to counter that with a losing strategy. Counter it with what works, but do it in service of the evidence.
Could I also now jump in on your
Please.
So love everything you guys are doing, because that's exactly what, unfortunately, this is now a psychological and emotional issue and not a fact-based one. And you can't use facts to get reason to get somebody out of a position that they didn't use reason to get themselves into. Right. And so I've done quite a few lobbying meetings with CAPE, with different MPs and sympathetic MPs that are all on various degrees caring about climate change. And in the end, what they tell us is what they need from us is to change the minds and hearts of Canadian citizens, because they are finding it extremely difficult to fight the misinformation, right? Because there's a lot of emotion-driven reasoning happening. And then that's why I wanted to share with you some concrete patient stories that are, of course, vague enough that I'm not breaking confidentiality, but to give you an idea that perhaps that's something you can think about doing as well. But next time you hear about something along those lines, think about think to yourself, is this health and physical mental health problem that this person is experiencing, is this financial problem that they're experiencing related to climate change? And if it is, can I park this in the back of my mind so that the next time I'm talking to somebody, I can make it relevant to them, right? I can make climate change something that they should care about because they've brought up to me in conversation that, hey, they're worried that their kid is coughing all the time, right? Or, hey, they're going to go hiking, but they got to wear some tick protection, right? And so to kind of work this in to make it relevant to people and to engage with them on a more emotional level so that we don't get lost in the numbers, because the numbers, unfortunately, right, like Paul said, there's a lot of misinformation and it's a losing strategy to go over there.
The numbers are critical.
The numbers are great. The numbers are in our favor, but the problem is it's not.
Embed them in a powerful strategy.
Exactly.
Are there more?
Well, there are more. We are
We need to
getting
wrap up.
to the scheduled end of our session, but we are actually waiting still on one speaker for the next session, so we can take a few more minutes if you all can take a few more minutes.
Yeah. And I do
I
have
just-
a few minutes to wrap up with. I'm supposed to be,
Oh, yes.
make sure I do calls to action.
Yes, I just did what I'm not supposed to do and turned away from the microphone while speaking. Okay, so since so many people wanted to ask Dave highly technical questions, maybe you could just speak a little bit about what Prime Minister Carney could do to improve the industrial carbon pricing system. Simple, straightforward question.
Yeah.
Two-word
So-
answer, I'm sure.
Yeah, so go to the Canadian Climate Institute.ca. Check out we have a link to industrial carbon pricing, and we have been publishing like every other week stuff. There's all kinds of stuff in there you can dig into on the emissions cap, on solutions to solve the how to improve the design, how to modernize. But there are two simple things to do it. One, transparency. So we really need these systems to come out of the dark so we can judge them, so we can see them, so investors know what they have. Because right now there's just no information. So good governance requires transparency. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think the Prime Minister can do is push the federal backstop forward. They have a regulation, they have a policy to defer to the provinces, and they just really need to enforce it against Saskatchewan. And then there's some design stuff that you basically want to, as I alluded to earlier, you want to make the markets function a little better. Like the Western Climate Initiative. So, I mean, those are the three things. I mean, we could go in all day into detail. Check out our latest blog. There's what's wrong with the systems. I think it's about 800 or 900 words. Take you like 8 or 9 minutes to read. So, yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you for that. So maybe now, Dr. Kershaw, you can share the calls to action.
Super.
Okay, well, that's a big question. So for the people on Zoom who probably couldn't hear that, there was a question about why carbon pricing wasn't directed more toward the top 15% of earners who have higher carbon footprints. I think that a lot of data shows that top 15% actually did pay quite a bit more than lower earners simply because they do have higher carbon footprints. But well, Dr. Kershaw, while you're standing at the podium, did you want to speak a bit to that?
Yeah, I actually do think that the design of the consumer price had that specifically in mind. And indeed, so much of the debate about the rebate was that it was delivering more back as social support to lower income households than those families were ever paying. So it became part of the income security strategy coming out of the COVID pandemic and the higher inflation. But we didn't convince people that that's how they felt about it. And for the most part, they didn't actually see in their bank accounts when they were getting the rebate for a long time, and they didn't even notice it was performing that role. Now you have, I think, this Canadian Climate Institute doing really great work showing how important the industrial price is. Notice this is the price on big companies, big industry, and asking them to pay their share. And Dave's work specifically will show that it's very difficult for them to pass on those costs to consumers. You must have a blog about that specifically at CCI. So if you're looking for that information, it speaks directly to this issue. I strongly recommend it. But no matter what, the opponents are going to say it absolutely does. That's a big part of their messaging anyhow. And so we still need to engage to some degree with flipping the script so that that's not what we're fighting over. Like, the fight ought to be, are we betraying our kids or not? That's what's at stake. And I think that that's something that we can then win, because there are a whole range of affordability things that we can put in place that don't betray our kids. So let's pursue that strategy. Which means I need to wind up here, people. I'm desperately trying to go forward. Can my friend help me going forward? It's no longer working. Okay, so I'd like one slide forward. Anyhow, the first thing it says is sign up. You are already part of Citizens Climate Lobby. And you know that the bigger we are, the more power we have. If you're not already engaged with CAPE and Gen Squeeze and CCI, join their networks too. That's how they can get information to you, and our ability to, our power to influence public policy grows with the size of our networks. Know the facts. Go to the Canadian Climate Institute. It does have the range of blogs, including this 5 things to know about Canada's industrial carbon pricing systems. It's a great one, a fast read. Then frame those facts to win people's hearts and minds. CAPE has kindly hosted a letter to our federal politicians talking about why we need the industrial price to protect human health, protect our kids' health. I've already shared with you the Gen Squeeze toolkit so that we leave a planet fit for our kids. Who in the room, hands up, are you ready to send that letter? Exactly. Are you ready to ask why those who oppose the pollution price at the industrial level are willing to betray our kids? Would you ask that online? Would you ask that in a meeting? Would you ask that in an event? I am. Okay. Well, those are our calls to action, because nobody wants to be remembered for wrecking the planet for our kids, and we still had one last chance to preserve it. We all wish you so much success with your lobbying days ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our presenters. Thank you all so much for that. So Kathy Orlando wants to take a photo. Did you take the photo you want to take, or? Okay. Places for a photo.